Hank, a quiet farmer from Willow Creek, had just loaded up his best dairy cow, Daisy, into the trailer hitched to his old red Massey Ferguson tractor. He was cruising down a back road, just minding his business, when out of nowhere a big rig came flying through a stop sign and slammed into the side of his tractor. The impact sent Hank flying into a ditch on one side of the road and poor Daisy into the other. Everything went silent except for the sound of Daisy moaning in pain. Hank could tell she was hurting bad. A state trooper showed up a few minutes later. He walked over to Daisy first, took one look at her, shook his head, pulled out his pistol, and gently ended her suffering. Then the officer crossed the road, gun still in hand, and looked down at Hank. "Sir," he said, "how are you feeling?" Hank blinked, looked at the gun, and replied, "Never been better." A man sat on the edge of the bed, watching his wife admire herself in the mirror. Her birthday was just around the corner, so he asked gently, "What would you like this year, honey?" Without missing a beat, she said, "I wish I was 8 again." The next morning, he sprang into action. He made her a giant bowl of chocolate cereal, just like kids eat. Then he whisked her off to the wildest amusement park in town. Every ride? She wrote it. Twice. The Loop of Doom, the Gut Twister, the Mega Scream, all of them. After 5 hours of whiplash and motion sickness, he treated her to McDonald's. Happy Meal, chocolate shake, the works. Still not done, he surprised her with movie tickets to the loudest superhero blockbuster in theaters. Popcorn, soda, M&Ms, everything a sugar-crazed 8-year-old could want. By the end of the day, she could barely walk. She flopped onto the bed like a jellyfish in heels. With a proud smile, he leaned in and said, "So, did you enjoy being 8 again?" She opened one eye, groaned, and muttered, "I meant my dress size, you goofball." A highway patrol officer had a favorite secret spot just around a curve, perfect for catching speeders with his radar gun. Hidden from view, he used it every year on busy weekends like Labor Day. So early that Saturday, he set up shop, radar ready, coffee in hand. But something strange happened. No one was speeding. In fact, every car passed him going exactly the speed limit. Some drivers even smiled and waved as they went by. Weird, he thought. No way they can see me from the road. Curious, he got out of his car and walked a bit up the highway. About 100 yards away, he found the reason. A kid was standing by the road holding a giant hand-painted sign that read, "Speed Trap Ahead." The officer couldn't help but laugh. Then he walked a little further and spotted a second kid, about 100 yards past the trap. This one had a sign, too. It simply said, "Tips," with a bucket full of coins at his feet. Moral of the story, you might dodge a ticket, but you're still going to pay the toll to genius. An old blind Marine walks into a bar he's never been in before, feeling around for a stool. He orders a shot of whiskey and relaxes a bit, unaware that he's wandered into an all-female biker bar. After a few minutes, he grins and says loudly, "Hey, anyone here want to hear a good blonde joke?" The room goes dead silent. In a gravelly voice, the woman next to him says, "Before you say another word, let me help you out, Marine. Since you're blind, you should know a few things." The bartender is blonde, and she's holding a baseball bat. The bouncer is blonde, and she's ex-military. I'm 6 feet tall, 180 pounds, blonde, and a black belt in judo. The woman on your left is a blonde powerlifter, and the woman on your right is a blonde pro wrestler with a temper. She pauses. Now, do you still want to tell that joke? The Marine takes a slow sip of his drink and mutters, "Not if I'll have to explain it 5 times. When Harold and Betty moved to Texas, Harold was determined to embrace his inner cowboy. So when he found a flashy pair of cowboy boots on sale, he bought them faster than you could say yee-haw. Strutting into the kitchen in his new kicks, chest out and ego bigger than a Texas steak, he asked, "Notice anything different, darling?" Betty glanced over her teacup. New attitude? Not satisfied, Harold disappeared into the bathroom, ditched everything but the boots, and reappeared buck naked, hands on hips like a rodeo champion. "How about now?" he asked, grinning. Betty looked him up and down, took a sip of tea, and said, "Whatever was sagging yesterday is still sagging today." Annoyed, Harold snapped, "It's sagging because it's admiring my boots." Without missing a beat, Betty replied, "Next time, Harold, buy a hat." A man was pulled over for speeding, and before the officer could say a word, the driver jumped out and said, "Officer, please, can I explain before you write the ticket?" The cop nodded. "Go ahead." The man pointed toward the car. "See the woman in the front seat? That's my wife. And the one in the back? That's my mother-in-law. She's been staying with us for 3 long months." "This morning," the man continued, "they had a massive argument. My mother-in-law said she's had enough and wants to go back to her own house. So now I'm driving like my life depends on it before they calm down and she changes her mind." The officer looked at the car, then back at the man. "Sir," he said, "get back in your car. I'm giving you a full police escort. Let's not take any chances." 2 sweet elderly ladies were out for a drive in their big old car. Neither of them could really see over the dashboard, but that didn't stop them from cruising through town. At the first intersection, the light was clearly red, and they drove straight through it. The woman in the passenger seat blinked a few times and thought, maybe I imagined that. A few minutes later, another red light, and again they didn't stop. Now she was getting nervous. "Okay, if it happens again, I'm definitely saying something." Sure enough, the third light was red, and they flew right through. She grabbed the seat, turned to her friend, and shouted, "Gloria, we just ran 3 red lights. We could have caused an accident." Gloria looked at her, completely shocked, and said, "Wait, I'm the one driving?" A cab driver in New York picks up a woman dressed as a nun on Halloween night. She settles into the back seat, and he keeps glancing at her through the rearview mirror. Finally, she says, "You keep staring. What's on your mind?" He hesitates. "I don't want to offend you, but I've always had a silly fantasy of being kissed by a nun." She laughs. "Well, that depends. Are you single?" "Yep," he says proudly. "Are you Catholic?" "Of course." He nods, crossing his fingers under the steering wheel. She smiles. "All right, then. Pull into that alley over there." Moments later, she plants a kiss on him so passionate it fogs up the windows. As they drive off, the cabbie suddenly starts to tear up. The woman asks, "What's wrong?" He sighs. "I lied. I'm married. And Jewish." She chuckles and says, "No worries, sweetheart. My name's Dave, and I'm heading to a costume party." After a round of golf, a nun returns to the convent and approaches the Mother Superior. She says, "Mother Superior, I need to confess something. Today I may have taken the Lord's name in vain." The Mother Superior asks gently, "Tell me what happened, dear." The nun explains, "I was on the verge of breaking 80 for the first time. I needed just a par on the final hole. My drive was perfect, straight down the fairway, but then a sudden gust blew my ball into the rough." The Mother Superior nods. "Was that when you lost your temper?" "No, I stayed calm," the nun replies. "I then hit a clean 8-iron onto the green, but out of nowhere, a squirrel snatched my ball and dragged it into a bunker." "Oh no," says the Mother Superior. "Did that make you swear?" "Still no," the nun says. "I managed a perfect bunker shot to about a foot from the hole." The Mother Superior leans in and asks, "So, did you miss the putt?" The nun sighs. "Yes, Mother Superior, that's when I lost it." Dave and Sarah were sound asleep when a sudden creak in the hallway shattered the peace of their midnight slumber. Sarah bolted upright, her eyes wide with panic. "Oh no, it's my husband! Quick, you have to leave!" she whispered urgently, her voice laced with an undeniable tremor. Without a moment's hesitation, Dave, propelled by an instinct he couldn't quite explain later, flung off the covers, launched himself out of bed, and dove through the window with the agility of a ninja, albeit one clad only in slippers. He crashed into the bushes below, scrambling to his feet before tearing across the lawn. He finally collapsed, breathless and disoriented in the middle of the street, wearing nothing but his socks. And that's when the realization hit him, as sudden and jarring as his landing in the bushes. "Wait a second, I am her husband." Still panting, his body stinging from the scratches of twigs and his pride severely wounded, Dave sheepishly tiptoed back inside. He found Sarah casually fluffing her pillow, a picture of serene composure. He blinked at her, a mixture of disbelief and confusion warring on his face. "Babe, I am your husband," he managed to stammer out. She looked at him, her expression completely deadpan, and slowly raised an eyebrow. Then, with a voice that held not a hint of mirth, she simply said, So why did you run? Dave never won an argument again after that night. A high-powered London attorney was driving through the scenic highlands when he casually rolled through a stop sign, thinking nothing of it. After all, he slowed down, didn't he? Moments later, blue lights flashed in his rearview mirror. A Scottish police officer strolled up to his window. "License and registration, please." The lawyer raised an eyebrow. "What's the problem, officer?" "You didn't come to a complete stop back there at the sign." "I slowed down. No one was around. What's the big deal?" "The law says you must stop completely," the officer replied calmly. The lawyer smirked. "Come on. Slowing down is basically the same thing. Surely you can't ticket me for that." The officer didn't flinch. "Sir, the law's clear. Stop means stop." The lawyer leaned back in his seat, oozing confidence. "Tell you what, if you can show me a meaningful difference between slowing down and stopping, I'll accept the ticket. If not, you let me off. Deal?" The officer thought for a moment, then said, "Aye, deal. Step out of the car." Curious and amused, the lawyer stepped out with a grin. The officer reached for his baton and started tapping it lightly against the lawyer's shins. Tap, tap, tap. The lawyer jumped back. "What the hell are you doing?" The officer smiled. "Now tell me, sir, would you like me to stop or just keep slowing down?" A farmer came into town one hot afternoon with his dog riding in the back of his truck. He parked, tied the dog to a post outside the local cafe, and went in for a cold drink. A few minutes later, the town police officer walked in and asked, "Hey, is that your dog out front?" "Sure is," the farmer replied. "Well," said the officer, "I think she's looking to, mate." The farmer raised an eyebrow. "Mate? Nah, I gave her a big breakfast before we left." "No, I mean she's in heat," the cop clarified. "Oh, don't worry," the farmer said. "She's tied up in the shade." Now clearly frustrated, the officer leaned in and said, "Sir, your dog wants a male companion." The farmer blinked, then grinned. "Well, why didn't you just say so? Be my guest. I've always been curious what a police dog would look like." It was a quiet afternoon at Mike's barber shop when a cheerful teen walked in, holding the hand of a small boy with messy curls. "I'll take a quick trim," the teen said. "And while you're at it, give this little guy a cut, too. I'm just stepping out to grab a soda. I'll be right back." Mike nodded and got to work. After the teenager's trim, he sat the little boy in the chair, chatting away and snipping carefully until the boy looked fresh and neat. But minutes turned to half an hour, then nearly an hour, and the teenager never came back. Mike finally asked the boy, "Hey, where's your big brother? He's taking his time, huh?" The boy blinked. "He's not my brother." Mike looked confused. "Then, who is he?" The kid shrugged. "No idea. I was just sitting outside eating a popsicle when he walked up and said, 'Want a free haircut?'" Mike stood frozen for a second, then slowly sighed. "Well, kid, at least you got the better end of the deal." An old lighthouse keeper was preparing for retirement and invited a young man to visit the remote island where the lighthouse stood. It was a brutal journey, towering waves, violent rain, and nothing but ocean for miles. When the young man finally arrived, soaked and exhausted, the old keeper gave him a full tour, the island, the living quarters, and finally the giant lantern that guided ships safely through the stormy seas. After hours of walking and talking, the old man finished with a smile. "That's the whole job. Simple, really. Any questions?" "Just one," the young man said. "The sea is rough. How do you get food and supplies? What if the weather keeps ships away?" The old keeper nodded. "Good question. Sometimes the waters are too dangerous and you might wait weeks for a boat. But there's a trick to getting more supplies quickly." "Oh," the young man asked, curious. "What's the trick?" The old keeper looked him in the eye and said, "Turn off the light." A woman asked if I wanted to see one of her tits. I said yes. She asked, "Which one?" I replied, "Left." She said, "Your left or my left?" Silly me, I've already seen my left. A struggling farmer named Joe had 5 female goats. Times were tough, feed prices were up, and he needed a plan. At the county fair, Joe met another farmer named Earl who had 5 male goats. Over a greasy corn dog and handshake, they made a deal. Let the goats get to know each other, and split any future kids 50/50ths. But here was the challenge. Joe and Earl lived 60 miles apart, and neither had a trailer. So they agreed to meet halfway each time, 30 miles each, in an open field to let nature do its thing. The next morning, Joe woke up at 5 a.m., loaded his girls into his old Rattling pickup, and met Earl. As the goats did their business, Joe asked, "So, how do I know if it worked?" Earl scratched his head and said, "Simple. If tomorrow morning they're lying in the grass, pregnant. If they're running through the mud, nope." The next morning, Joe looked out the window. Sure enough, goats in the mud. Disappointed but determined, he hosed them down, packed them up, and drove them out again, and again, and again. 8 mornings, same routine, same muddy goats. By day 9, Joe was exhausted. He couldn't drag himself out of bed. He called out to his wife, "Sweetheart, can you check outside and tell me if the goats are in the mud or the grass?" She looked out the window and shouted, "Neither! They're already in the truck, and one's honking the horn like they're late." An elderly couple was flying to Hawaii to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary. Everything was going perfectly, until the captain came on the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have some serious news. All engines have failed. We're going to attempt an emergency landing on a small island below. We may survive, but there's a strong chance we'll never be found and could live on this island forever." With expert skill, the pilots managed to land the plane safely on a deserted beach. A while later, still sitting in the sand, the husband turns to his wife and nervously asks, "Did you pay the car loan this month?" "No, I forgot," she replies. "What about the credit card bill?" "Oh, no, I meant to, but I didn't send it." "And the hospital bill from last month?" "I'm so sorry, I completely forgot that one too." Suddenly, he grabs her, lifts her off the ground, and gives her the biggest hug in 50 years. She pulls back and asks, "Why are you so happy right now? We just crash-landed on a deserted island." He grins and says, "They'll find us. Trust me, someone will find us." One quiet night in rural Maine, an old man woke up and gently reached over, only to realize his wife had passed in her sleep. He picked up the phone and called his son. "Son," he said softly, "I need you to come by. Your mother's gone." The son rushed over, and the two of them carefully carried her down the stairs to prepare for the next steps. But just as they reached the bottom, the son slipped a bit, and her head gently bumped the banister. Suddenly, she gasped, sat bolt upright, and started yelling, "What the hell are you two doing trying to kill me early?" She lived another 2 years and reminded them every single day about that little accident. Then one morning, she truly passed, peacefully. The old man called his son again. As they gently lifted her from the bed, the father leaned in and said quietly, "All right, son. This time, whatever you do, don't bump her head." An elderly couple is enjoying lunch at a quiet little diner when the husband leans in and says, "Do you remember our first time? Over 50 years ago behind that old village tavern by the fence?" She smiles. "Oh, Jim, of course I do." He winks. "What do you say we take a walk down memory lane? Just for old time's sake?" Giggling like teenagers, they slowly make their way toward the tavern, leaning on each other and their walking sticks. A young police officer nearby overhears the conversation and, amused and curious, decides to follow from a distance, just to make sure everything's okay. What happens next stuns him. Let's just say sparks fly, literally, and the couple ends up on the ground out of breath and giggling like school kids. As they brush themselves off and start to walk away, the officer, wide-eyed, approaches them and says, "Excuse me, that was impressive. What's your secret after all these years?" The old man chuckles. "Son, 50 years ago, that fence wasn't electric." A young man named Jake bought a horse from a rancher for $250. The rancher agreed to deliver it the next day. But the next morning, he showed up looking uncomfortable. "Hey, Jake, there's a problem. The horse, well, let's just say he's no longer with us." Jake raised an eyebrow. "All right then, just give me my money back." The rancher sighed. "I'd love to, but I already spent it." Jake paused, then said, "Okay, just bring the horse over anyway." The rancher was confused. "What on earth are you going to do with him now?" Jake smirked. "I'm going to raffle him off." The rancher burst out laughing. "You can't raffle off a horse that's, out of service." Jake just said, "Watch me. I just won't mention that part." A month later, they ran into each other again. The rancher asked, "So, what happened with that horse?" Jake replied, "Raffled him off. Sold 500 tickets at $5 each and made $2,500. The rancher was stunned. "Didn't anyone complain?" Jake smiled. "Only the winner. So I gave him his $5 back." A woman named Betty strolled into a bank one morning, lugging a massive bag of cash. She walked straight to the receptionist and said, "I need to speak with the bank president. I want to open a new account." The receptionist blinked. "Ma'am, you can open an account without meeting the president." But Betty insisted, politely but firmly. Eventually, the receptionist gave in and took her inside. Minutes later, Betty was sitting across from the president himself. "So," he said, "how can I help you?" Betty smiled. "I'd like to open an account and deposit $180,000 in cash." She began piling stacks of money onto his desk. The president was stunned. "That's quite a sum. May I ask how you got it?" "Oh, it's nothing shady," Betty chuckled. "I make bets." "Bets?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes. In fact, I'd like to make one with you right now," she said, leaning in. "I bet you $25,000 that your right hand tastes like eggs." The president burst out laughing. "That's ridiculous." "If I'm wrong, I'll pay you $10,000, Betty added. Intrigued and amused, he shook her hand. "You've got yourself a deal." "Great," Betty replied. "I'll be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. with my lawyer. Be ready." That night, the president was obsessed. He sniffed, washed, and licked everything. No egg smell, no egg taste. Easy win, he thought. At 9 a.m. sharp, Betty arrived with her lawyer. "Ready?" she asked. The president held out his hand. Betty leaned in, sniffed, then licked his hand. The lawyer in the corner immediately face-palmed and groaned, slamming his head gently on the wall. "What's wrong with him?" the president asked. Betty smiled. "Oh, I bet him $100,000 that by 9 a.m. today I'd be licking the hand of a bank president, and he said I'd never pull it off." A blonde was driving along the highway a few hours outside San Diego when she spotted a man waving for help next to his broken-down truck. She pulled over and rolled down the window. "Are you heading to San Diego?" he asked. "Sure am," she replied. "Perfect. I've got 2 chimpanzees in the back that need to get to the zoo. They're exhausted, and I can't leave them here. Could you take them for me? I'll pay you $200. She thought for a second and said, "Why not? I've done crazier things on a Saturday." He carefully buckled the chimps into the back seat, handed her the money, and off she went. A few hours later, the man finally got his truck running and made it into San Diego. As he drove downtown, he suddenly slammed on the brakes. There she was, walking down the street with the 2 chimps, all wearing sunglasses, holding cotton candy, and taking selfies. He ran over and shouted, "What are you doing? I gave you $200 to take them to the zoo." She smiled and said, "I did, but we had some money left over, so now we're going to Seaworld." An elderly couple was celebrating their 75th wedding anniversary. The husband took his wife's hand and said, "There's something I've always wondered about. Our 10th child never quite looked like the others. I want you to know these 75 years have been the best of my life, and nothing will change that. But I have to ask, did he have a different father?" The wife lowered her gaze, then softly confessed, "Yes, he did." The husband was stunned, struggling to process what she said. With tears in his eyes, he asked, "Who was it? Who was the father?" After a pause, the wife looked up and said with a gentle smile, "You?" 2 priests decided to take a much-needed break from their parish duties and booked a tropical getaway to sunny Hawaii. But before the plane even took off, they made a pact. No collars, no black clothes. We're going full tourist mode. Once they landed, they hit a beach shop and loaded up on colorful shirts, floral shorts, flip-flops, straw hats, and sunglasses the size of dinner plates. They looked more like cruise ship mascots than clergymen. The next morning, they strolled along the beach, sipping fruit smoothies and enjoying the sun, completely relaxed and totally incognito. Then suddenly, a stunning blonde in a bikini walked by, flashed a smile, and said, "Good morning, Father. Good morning, Father." They nearly dropped their drinks. How on earth did she know? Determined not to be recognized again, they returned to the shops that afternoon and cranked up the disguise. Neon tank tops, goofy socks with sandals, seashell necklaces, and hats that said, "Aloha, dude." They looked ridiculous and completely un-priest-like. The next day, back on the beach, they strutted confidently, sure their cover was solid. But wouldn't you know it? The same blonde passed by, waved, and said with a grin, "Good morning again, fathers." One of them stood up and said, "All right, we give up. How did you know we were priests?" She chuckled, took off her sunglasses, and said, "It's me, Sister Mary from the convent. You two are terrible at hiding." Alice was supposed to bake a cake for the church ladies' bake sale, but she completely forgot until the very last minute. Panicking, she whipped up an angel food cake, but when she pulled it from the oven, the center had completely collapsed. "No time to bake another," she muttered. Desperate, she searched the house for something to fix the sagging middle, and then, brilliant idea or not, she grabbed a roll of toilet paper from the bathroom, plunked it in the center, and slathered on icing until it looked perfectly presentable. Crisis averted. Off to church it went. Just to be safe, Alice gave her daughter money and strict instructions. Be the first in line, buy that cake, bring it home, no questions. Well, the daughter arrived a little late. The cake was already sold. Alice was mortified. The next day, she went to a friend's house for a bridge game. Afterward, they were served lunch and, of course, dessert. To Alice's horror, there it was, her cake. She nearly jumped up to explain, but before she could say a word, someone at the table gasped, "Wow, what a gorgeous cake." Alice froze, and then the hostess smiled proudly and said, "Thank you. I baked it myself." An atheist was hiking through the woods, marveling at nature. "What majestic trees, what powerful rivers, what beautiful animals," he said. Suddenly he heard a rustling in the bushes, and out charged a massive 7-foot grizzly. The man ran for his life, but the bear was gaining fast. Just as he tripped and fell, he looked up to see the bear raising a giant paw. In a panic, he shouted, "Oh my God!" Everything froze, time stopped, the forest went silent. A bright light appeared, and a voice said, "You've denied me your whole life, taught others I don't exist, and now you call on me?" The man paused and replied, "It would be wrong to suddenly become a believer. But could you make the bear a Christian?" "Very well," said the voice. The light disappeared. The forest returned to normal. Then, the bear lowered his paw, bowed his head, and said, "Lord, thank you for this meal I'm about to receive. Amen." A few days after Christmas, a mother was working in the kitchen, listening to her young son playing with his new electric train in the living room. She heard the train stop, and her son said, "All of you SOBs who want off, get the hell off now, because this is the last stop, and all of you SOBs who are getting on, get your backsides on the train, because we're going down the tracks." The mother went nuts and told her son, "We don't use that kind of language in this house. Now I want you to go to your room, and you are to stay there for 2 hours. When you come out, you may play with your train, but I want you to use nice language." 2 hours later, the son comes out of the bedroom and resumes playing with his train. Soon the train stopped, and the mother heard her son say, "All passengers who are disembarking from the train, please remember to take all of your belongings with you. We thank you for riding with us today and hope your trip was a pleasant one. We hope you will ride with us again soon." She hears the little boy continue, "For those of you just boarding, we ask you to stow all of your hand luggage under your seat. Remember, there is no smoking on the train. We hope you will have a pleasant and relaxing journey with us today." As the mother began to smile, the child added, "For those of you who are cheesed off about the 2-hour delay, please see the bitch in the kitchen." When a group of tourists visited a crocodile farm, the owner of the place launched a daring proposal. "Whoever dares to jump, swim to shore, and survive, I will give $1 million. Nobody dared to move. Suddenly a man jumped into the water and desperately swam towards the shore while he was chased by all the crocodiles. With great luck he arrived, taking the admiration of everyone in the place. Then the owner announced, "We have a brave winner." After collecting their reward, the couple returned to the hotel. Upon arrival, the manager told him he was very brave to jump. Then the man said, "I didn't jump, someone pushed me." His wife smiled. Moral: behind every successful man, there is a woman who pushes him.